I'm Alistair, IDEST Training Manager, and welcome to IDEST Tutorials. Welcome back. Today's video is about thread gauges, plug gauges and ring gauges. So we're going to find out what they are, how they're used, how to look after them, and what the classes of the gauges are. Hopefully make it a little bit more understandable for you. So let's go and see what's involved. Right, in this tutorial we'll be having a look at what the uses are, what types of thread gauges are available, their various sizes that are used in the inspection and testing of diving cylinders. We'll have a look at thread pitch, the various classes available, and some technical information on tolerance positions, care and maintenance of your thread gauges, and finally calibration. As I'm sure most of you know, the thread gauges are used for a number of things during the inspection and testing of diving cylinders and valves. It's certainly used for the neck thread on the cylinder, and then for the stem of the valve, and of course the outlet port for the valve as well, the G5/8. So now let's look at what the various types are. Here is the plug gauge. In this case it's an M25x2 and it consists of two threaded ends. The go, which is the longer of the two, very finely machined thread on it. Then the no-go, the shorter, stumpier of the two, is less finely machined because obviously these threads are not going to actually go into the thread of the cylinder. It shows you the go and no-go ends clearly stamped into the thread gauge. Here is the serial number 47977, and we've also put a sticker on it to indicate who it belongs to. The other type of gauges that we have are the ring gauges. These are in two types. There is a thick go ring gauge and a thinner no-go ring gauge. The go gauge has a front on it with all of the details etched into its surface. In this case it's a G3/4. It tells you it's the go, and here is the serial number at the top, 28567. The sticker on the side here tells you when the gauge was actually tested last by a UCAS accredited laboratory, and that is used on external threads because that is the female. Here is the alternative, the no-go. In this instance it has a red dot to indicate that it is the no-go. It is a G3/4, and again here is the serial number on the bottom. The alternative way of showing that it's a no-go gauge is to actually have a groove cut through the outside of the gauge. Sometimes this is painted red to emphasize the point that it is a no-go gauge. It's always advisable to have your gauges stored somewhere safe, even while you're using them. So in this instance it's in a foam lined box with the actual shapes of the gauges cut out, and the gauges would be returned once they are used back into that particular location. Looking now at the thread pitch, it's defined as the distance between the threads, that's the peaks or the troughs of the thread, and expressed in either millimeters or in inches. Thread gauge classes distinguish themselves by the amount of tolerance that's specified. We have in two grades here. We have a unified threads, which is BSP. They have class A and class B. The class A are used for external threads where we would be using a ring gauge, and the class B is used for measuring internal threads where we would use a plug gauge. The metric threads, on the other hand, they have tolerance grades of 4, 6 and 8. Grade 6 is the nearest to the unified class for the fine threads, whereas grade 8 is for larger or coarser threads. We now come to the technical stuff concerning tolerance positions, These are signified by letters, and basically it is whether it is a fine thread or whether it is a coarse thread, and the sort of allowances that are being made for each of these threads. External threads use small letters G, H and E, and internal threads use the larger letter G and H, and it's quite clear from the visual display what each of those small and large letters signify. Now we come to looking at the types of threads. BSP distinguishes themselves with two types, a parallel thread and a taper thread. The parallel threads are signified by the letter G and the taper threads by the letter R. That's why on a calibration certificate you often see the letter G in front of the 3/4 or the G in front of the 5/8 thread. Metric threads also use G as a signifier, and this is also for parallel threads that contain pressure, and it means that these particular threads are able to be installed and removed from a device without causing any damage to the thread. Moving on to care and maintenance, it's important that these gauges are stored in a foam-lined box to protect their very fine threads. Never leave them on the workbench so that they get damaged. Always clean these gauges before you use them so that you don't leave grit and grime on them. Use a nylon brush to clean them, never a steel, because this will start to wear away the gauges. And alternate your ring gauge faces so that it spreads the wear from the front to the back of the gauge. And finally, look after these very expensive gauges. They are important to your job. And finally, on the subject of calibration, the gauges are normally calibrated every year. However, from time to time there may be gauges that you don't use very often, in which case these can be extended by using a tracker sheet. You need to apply to the chief engineer using the application form D067 to get permission to use the tracker sheets. These would then be sent to you by the chief engineer. You can extend the life of your gauges to 250 uses or 3 years, whichever occurs first. Always use a UCAS accredited laboratory to have your gauges calibrated. The reasons are given in the tutorial number 1, and make sure that you keep all your calibration certificates in a folder, because this will help you track how your gauges are wearing over a period of time. Finally, look at IDEST tutorial number 1 for more details on calibration certificates and the information contained within them. So there you go. I hope you found that interesting and that it's clarified a few things for you. Just look forward for another IDEST tutorial. Goodbye for now.